I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Finance on Tuesday, July 10th. Let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda, public comments. And no public comments.
If I may, I saw on your agenda you have some input from Bob. And if there's anything I can lend to that, I will. I was in the same meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any correspondence?
Correspondence?
No,
No?
sorry.
Okay. Moving on to the minutes of a number of public meetings. Actually, Dion and I spoke earlier today. I think our goal in the future is to try to not have such a lag in the minutes. This was just one of those situations where we had lots of meetings, a very compressed time. You want to get the meeting minutes out accurately. It does make it hard on us to review these, to kind of remember what happened. So going forward, we will attempt to keep these more timely. So bear with us, hopefully this last time. Taking the minutes in the order of which the meetings occurred, and I believe we need to go through each meeting individually, because we have different members at different meetings. Let us start with the first meeting, March 20th, Tuesday.
I'd make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous. Taking the next meeting. This will be Thursday, March 22nd. Meeting, minutes of the special meeting.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, March 22nd as presented.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Moving on to the next meeting, Thursday, April 12th, special joint meeting. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Oh, that total needs to be amended, the 888.
Oh, on the
Yes,
second page?
correct, yep.
I was not at this meeting, so I can't.
I'm sorry, what was amended?
If you look on the second page, the third point indented, we asked for the additional fund, 88867 is the amount. So the minutes need to be amended for correcting that number. So the motion would be to accept the minutes as amended. Do we have a motion for that? So moved. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
The next meeting, Wednesday, April 25th, special meeting.
I was not at that meeting either. No, really.
I know Frank Mania was
Oh, thank.
In addition to the minutes or the attachments, so I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as submitted. Second, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted for April 25th meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Deanna, I have to abstain as well.
Moving on to the final meeting minutes, June 12th.
Well, I was at this one, so I would make a motion to approve the minutes of June 12th as presented.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Oh, your coffee smells so good.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Again, thanks all for being patient, going through a number of minutes. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, the consideration of request for Stony Hill Fire Department, some air bottles.
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
I love
SCBA.
saying that.
Yes.
Breathing.
You actually voted on this last time, but there was an error in the email, and it didn't extend out with the quantity.
So we had a number of items to approve, so we approved exactly one. So what they need is a dozen, which by law must be replaced by August 1st. So I would ask, and this was approved by the Board of Selectmen last week, so I would ask that you approve an amount, total amount not to include, or not to exceed 14,460. And that would kind of, you may even want to phrase it to rescind the earlier approval, because that would be inclusive of that one that you approved last time. 12 is the grand total, not 13.
Matt, is the financial month what we approved in the
Mhm.
budget?
Yep. It just didn't,
It's just the quantity.
the quantity wasn't included, so it wasn't extended out on the
It's an
spreadsheet.
expensive one.
Yes, that's correct. Expensive one.
No, actually, what was approved was only $1,200.
Yeah, that's one bottle.
For one, but they needed,
12.
12.
When we did the budget,
Yeah,
No,
that,
at the last meeting?
Last meeting.
it was, in the
The
budget, in the capital budget is correct. In the request we made with the other items last time, it was, the quantity got lopped off, so it just came out to one, and nobody really noticed it.
That was my question on the capital budget.
Yeah, right, correct.
And to just be specific about it, it'll come out of the capital non-recurring.
Correct.
Yeah, it was a different amount in the capital budget. Oh, it was within dollars it is, all right? But the reason why it was different, this is an updated price. When he came up with the price back in September, October, I mean, he had prices then. Now it's almost a year later, so things change.
Yeah, it changed on January 1st, I think.
are you saying that in the budget that we voted on?
It's not the budget, the capital, not,
Okay, so
the capital plan.
non-recurring, we voted on these bottles.
You only voted on one bottle.
So how can we?
Not in the budget.
No,
Well,
no,
just
no, no.
It's not in the
No,
budget, it's not in the budget.
At the last meeting.
At the last
No,
meeting.
wait a minute.
But you
Wait
never
a minute.
voted on the capital non-recurring.
At the
You
last-
voted,
I'm sorry. At
yeah,
the
you
last
voted on
meeting-
500,000 to be approved for the year. Now you're making the allocation of what you're gonna use the 500,000 for. And in this case, it's going to be $14,000 out of the 500,000.
But we approved $1,200?
Right.
For one.
So we're gonna rescind
No,
that.
I understand, I just want to know that, it just seems that odd that it would be, you would be able to just do that. And I understand why you do it, but it just procedurally, I just have a question, that's all. But
Well-
go ahead, carry on.
So maybe just let me tee it up to make sure we're all on the same page, make sure I'm on the same page, you all are probably already there. Last meeting, we approved withdrawing $1,208 out of the capital non-recurring account for the payment of one bottle.
1,205.
It was $1,205,
Yes.
$1,205. The bottles were included in the capital non-recurring list of
Correct.
items that we had had for some time. The error was in calculating what the ask was.
Yeah.
The ask was not for one bottle, but it was for 12.
Correct.
So the ask should have been 12 bottles, 14, not to exceed 14,460.
Yeah,
Which, Bob, I think was within a few $100s
Yeah,
of what we
yeah.
had teed up in capital non-recurring.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, to Cynthia's point about procedurally,
Yeah.
it seems like you'll just do, when you do your capital non-recurring carry forward schedule, you'll show the
This amount,
coming out instead of the 1205.
Right.
correct.
So what, I'm not belaboring it, it's just, so what would you do, like, just increase the amounts and say that instead of, it's 12,000 instead of 1,200, but even that the gap was bigger, what would you do?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm saying is if it was reflected in the capital non-recurring as $1, but, okay, I'm sorry. Like, let's say that there's a difference between $2,000 in what was approved and what is needed. You would just rescind that and,
Let me,
yeah, you understand what I'm asking?
I
I
can.
might not, let me just make sure. I think what I'm hearing you ask, Cynthia, is what happens if the actual price came in much higher than what we had?
That's one consideration.
Was that what you?
Not really,
All right, then
but
what-
it was
yeah, I
just
know.
the concept of rescinding and it's like another vote.
Can I address that? If it would be easier procedurally, you can make a motion to appropriate $13,255 for the remaining 11, and just leave the prior approval there. Either way,
The
right.
14,460 out, reduced by the 1205.
correct. And
All
it
right.
comes,
As a remedy or to address or something, that would make me.
whatever way is easier for you guys, it doesn't matter.
All right, so the ask, amended ask now will be for $13,255. Did I do my math right?
Mm-hmm.
13,255.
Yeah. It's the 14,460, not to exceed less than 1205 from the prior.
Right.
So we'll entertain a motion to approve the purchase of 12 self-contained. 11 self, I was trying to remember the self-contained breathing apparatus for a total not to exceed $13,255.
Correct.
To be taken out of capital non-recurring.
Correct.
The
Second,
oldest,
I will second that motion.
the oldest layering. And we have a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Next on the agenda, we have an update from Robert, our Board of Finance ex officio, a member of the Public Site and Building Committee for the Johnson and Rockwell School renovation project. You may recall, I had asked that, I had requested of Matt and the Board of Selectmen that the Board of Finance have a representative on the committee for the school renovation. What I saw in this police station exercise was that there was a tremendous amount of expertise on that board, and where the help was needed, where the assistance would have been most helpful was in the finance. I think for a finance person, when the numbers became available on the police station, it was immediately understood where the challenge was. And so it was that kind of technical finance background and training that I thought needed to be, that we needed to bring that could be helpful. So Robert's filling that role, and Robert, you attend City, so could you give us an update?
Yes, so they meet twice a month. They're meeting the second Tuesday of the month, so they're cranking away right now, and the fourth Tuesday of the month. So I'll be attending the fourth Tuesday, which happens to correspond largely with the discussion on the schools. So that works out pretty well. And Larry was there, so please keep me on course. So I attended my first meeting. It was a brief little meeting starting at 6:30 and ending up at 10:30. So it calls for some real endurance. As Bob said, they're an impressive group of people who really know their specific areas of expertise. But the meetings are, let's just say, sometimes lack specific directions. They ramble forward without a real subject included, whatever. But they get there. I mean, they're a great group. One of the things which was very evident to me was the sting that they all are feeling regarding the overage on the police station. So that was very evident, and it was referred to several times by various members of the committee. And largely, in our 4 hours of discussion, we spent quite a bit of time reviewing the value engineering report. So in the specific area, already based on the value engineering estimates, we're over the initial budget and into the contingency, not full contingency, but moved over the contingency. And it was 50,000, I forget, some amount into it. And the concern there is that at this point it's too early, even for our estimates, to be that way, because it hasn't gone out to bid. So there was a big concern of looking for areas where we could pull back. And there were some areas which were very controversial, like the amphitheaters, which Mary and I discussed a little bit, the open air amphitheaters, and whether they can be pulled back. But there were maybe, I don't know, 9, 10 areas identified in the meeting which could be looked at again and saying maybe we can eliminate this or scale back or whatever, so that even in this early stage, we're staying within the initial budget. So that was interesting. And again, I'm just an observer at this point and have no real value to add, but interested in how they're directing it. The other item which I thought from a financial standpoint was interesting was the owner's representative. And I think you remember we had discussions even in the budget in this meeting that it was probably advisable to have an owner's representative there. One of the keys is apparent to me is that we don't have a real good template or job description of what that owner's representative should do, what authorities they have. You know, they talked about the ability to approve change orders, because when you meet every 2 weeks, you can't approve a change order. And change orders can contribute to overage of the budget very rapidly, and they need someone there who really takes a vested interest, can be on site, and then has ability to approve. Well, how much can they approve before it goes to the committee? So all these dynamics are being discussed and worked out so that they can come up with some type of a template of an owner's representative that's going to be truly meet the needs and be reflective of the financial concerns that we all have. So those were two of the big items that I picked up in terms of the financial controls and concerns that they had. Is there anything else, Larry, that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, some of the frankly premature decisions that were brought forward were dealing with educational specs that were approved by the state. We haven't even had a single shovel in the ground yet, and we're starting to say, no, we don't agree with that, and that's totally inappropriate. Those were put together with the architect and with the administration, and they were dissected and evaluated. And when we went forward to the state, that is what we presented. And you were right in saying that there are concerns about the same thing happening on this project that happened with the police station, unfortunately. And what my sense was, they were moving to build a bigger contingency so that they could afford an owner's rep who they believe needs to work 40 hours a week for an indefinite period of time. The job description that I researched on an owner's rep, and that Rizzo understands as an owner's rep, and that the architect understands as an owner's rep, is kind of a mediator. The construction company and the architect have primary responsibility and accountability for delivering those plans as they were given, those construction plans. And if there's an issue, and I'm not talking about add alternates and looking for value engineering yet, but if there's an issue, the owner's representative would then come forward to the building commission and says, we need a resolution here. The owner's rep responsibility is not to come forward and say, this was done and we got to pay somebody for it. That is after the fact. And Rizzo and Perkins need to be held accountable first. And if there's an issue that can't be resolved, then the building commission has to deal with that. And to have somebody there 40 hours a week representing the building commission is going to cost a ton of money.
Do you have an amount for a time?
I talked to Bob Trippy, who when he heard, and I don't know what they're going to resolve tonight upstairs, because Terry put together a job description and a responsibility layout for the owner's representative. And it's based on some research that we did, some discussion that we had with other schools that were using owner's representative. Not one of them said they use somebody 40 hours a week indefinitely. And the estimate, if you did that, would be over $1 million for an owner's representative.
Is an owner's representative like a clerk of the works, but with more responsibility?
Now, we have a clerk of the works is another name for the commissioning agent. And that person's already on board.
Mm-hmm.
And that person is challenging what we have and what is being proposed in the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing kind of work.
We used to have clerks of the works years ago when we would do any town projects, but they represented the town, and they were the ones that oversaw the amount of pipes that went in the ground, or, you know, that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure why you say that the clerk of the works isn't working for
It's a
us.
different definition, some of that responsibility to go and, if they're following a plan that has been agreed to
Mm-hmm.
by the architect and by the construction company, and meets the specifications and the design that was approved by the state a couple of weeks ago, design development, I think they followed, it wasn't conceptual design, it was design development, so they can begin putting together the documents that the contractors would be following in the blueprint. If they're following that, there's always an issue coming across something that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either gonna have to be value engineered to find a solution for it, or that owner's representative, representing the town, would come forward to the building commission, who has authority to make that decision, and say, here it is. We haven't spent any money yet, but it looks like we're gonna have to. And you need to make a decision on that. To give the owner's representative approval to approve $50,000 worth of cost changes. Cost changes are after the fact kind of occurrences, and I made that comment to the building commission. When you come forward with cost changes, that's probably the wrong term.
Change orders?
Change orders. Something's already been done, and someone says, I want to be paid for what I did. But there's got to be some other accountability before that happens. Otherwise, you get into things coming at you that you have no control over.
Well, in the contract, there are three types of change orders. One that has to do with something that goes against the design, and then they would be responsible. And then something that the commission would want, or
Something that we say, you know what, we didn't think about this,
Right.
we really
And
need to
then
put
we
it
would be
in.
responsible.
But then you end up with, if you're doing this correctly, in my opinion, you're looking for an offset to that. If you say you forgot something and you really need it, then you're looking for either an alternate approach to that, some value engineering, or giving up something to free up the money to do the thing that you forgot to do. And then there is mistakes that are made on the construction and the architect's end. They're accountable
their
for that.
responsibility, yeah.
And they have to justify why it was done. And that's a decision that has to be brought, I believe, the way the owner's rep should be working, to the building commission. I know these fellas are all full-time employees and they can't be there. But to have somebody that is a quasi-building commission on site 40 hours a week is gonna be expensive, and we need to understand that.
Is there
That
money?
what they're going on, they're talking about right now. Why is that necessary?
Is there funding available for that? I mean, when you said before
Not-
that some of these
Not if you have
ones,
someone there 40 hours a week.
you know,
You talked to Mr. Trippy, and who's done a lot of this, and the work they did with the Denver school system. They didn't have an owner's rep because they have their own construction
mhm.
department over there, and Antonio Iadarola is the town engineer, but he also sits on the approval committee at the state level, approving school construction grants. So,
So this would
he
be
knows what's going on.
anywhere between, say, a $50,000 to $75,000 a year position, give or take? And it would
I believe
just-
they had set aside somewhere in the vicinity, when the initial thought was in 40 to 50.
Mhm.
And, I don't know if some of the things that they think are unnecessary, which are inappropriate to do at this point in time, are being proposed to fund the extra money that's gonna be necessary to pay for the owner's representative.
I'm sorry, I may have lost it.
But I'm
How
speculating.
much do we think, understanding it's very preliminary, but what are folks thinking about the range of cost for an owner's rep?
I believe, from what I heard, and there are other discussions obviously that go on, it's 40 to 50. But that's on an as-needed basis. You would call the owner's representative in and say, I need you to be involved in this. But the owner's representative doesn't live up there.
Oh,
20
I see.
hours at Rockwell and 20 hours at watching everything that's being done. I mean, what are we paying the project manager and Rizzle for? And what am I paying the architect?
The $1 million number that you threw
That
out.
was a guesstimate if you use somebody 40 hours a week for 2 years,
Got it, full, now I understand.
that's what you're looking
So, I just have to say this, that, I mean, I'm glad that this is being done and that we're thinking this way and that it's upsetting to me that we had to learn it by the police department, but I have to say, I've been talking about this for 7 years to get an owner's rep or somebody on a project. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and it just, no one pays attention. No one paid any attention to this, so now what's gonna happen is, and you very well may need that, but then you say, well, is it because, like, if you had this, you wouldn't go $1 million over budget? I mean, or what is it to insure? Because if it's $1 million, it's gonna go back to the people. And this should have been, if we had been thinking, and if anyone had paid attention to the people who were saying owner's rep, we would have, that would have been built into the budget. And I'm just really disappointed and a little bit frustrated that it's come to this, that we're gonna be put in a position. It's upsetting.
at. My son's in the construction business down in the Gold Coast. They don't use owner's representatives. They have a contract with a construction company and with the architect, and that's who they hold accountable.
Is that a town?
And those are the people that have to deliver. And they don't have someone following along, making sure that the construction company is doing what they're paid to do.
Okay, look,
Your
I think
son
we
works for a
wanted,
town?
we
He works for a
wanted this
town?
discussion to be an update, and so I think we.
Oh, that's fine.
We're debating something that would
Yeah.
happen historically.
And so, I just wanna make sure I understand, if I were, in my words, so these are probably not the exact right words, right, but the current financial status of this project on material side is more or less within budget, folks are, again, early on, many discussions still being had, but it's within the budget that folks have communicated to the community and asked for approval on the materials.
Correct.
We haven't done anything yet.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But
We don't
you're
do anything until
They're-
November,
they're
December.
tweaking their early
This is
estimates,
all
but of course-
preparatory work,
Understood.
investigative work,
Understood.
making sure there are no surprises out there. They just ran cameras through the septic lines there to see whether those are gonna have to be in the water lines and make sure there's no blockage that you find out after you open the scooper.
John Lecky's out there with some kind of solar, trying to see if there's anything buried in the ground.
All right, so again, on the materials side, understand it's early, understand it's all,
So-
within the.
So the value engineering, they want that to be in line before they start going out to the bids, because those bids might come off above or below. And so at least they want to have a tightened down position right now, which is very early in the game. And you know, the reason I brought up this OR is because, you know, as my colleague has pointed out, we don't have a lot of experience in this, and we're really trying to understand what is the value add of this position, you know? Because as Larry pointed out, architects have this responsibility, the builders have this responsibility, and the commission can't assign its responsibility for ultimate approval to some other third party. So it's a very tricky job they're coming up with in order to define what this is and whether the value we see out of that OR is going to be worth the investment. And we don't really know these things yet.
Value engineering occurs along the way. When you get the contractors hired, the subs hired, and they come across saying, you know, I think this can be done cheaper. And there's some ways that we can use different material. But to do it now, when we're still developing the contracts to go out to hire how do you know what it is? I know there's an issue about whether or not there's an agreement that the amphitheaters are necessary. That was our choice.
Yeah,
And that's part of the building specs, and to say we don't need it,
that's not what
Okay.
this board, that's not what this board wanted to update.
No, I know.
The update was just on the finance.
but
So,
that comes under the label of value engineering.
fair enough.
Okay.
And if folks want to talk about that in detail, they should go to the public building and
Yes.
site committee
Yes.
meetings and hear the discussion and contribute to that discussion. For our purposes, right, when folks come to us on the street and tell us that they're concerned about the renovation, given our prior experience, what we tell them, based on the report out that we received, that on the material side, no changes. On the personnel side, folks are working through what the owner rep responsibilities are and therefore what the costs may be. And that will be determined by the committee.
So there's people that actually do this for a job, like this is their career, their owner's reps as a career. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking, if you do this, you work here in Bethel for a couple of years, then you go to another project for a couple of years. Is that how it works? Like, because
There are people who have that experience.
Okay.
Rizzo has somebody that they use as a consultant doing that kind of work for them, but it's not a full-time job for that person on Rizzo's payroll.
It would probably be like a consultant, and then they would go project.
If I might address a couple of points.
I would only ask, we got a couple things to get through. So
Yeah,
just
I
keep
know,
it on
I
the
know,
finance.
but I want to give the chair of the Board of Ed some reassurance on one thing. The owner of this project is the Board of Ed. I've been through 2 school renovations, and I have been through value engineering where the building committee came to the Board of Ed and requested a change in specs. The Board of Ed does not have to grant them. You would have to vote on that thing, because I clearly remember Bill Shannon coming to us and saying, and to a related point, value engineering also happens when you get a bid, as we've seen, and that bid is much higher than that estimate in the project, then you're forced to do value engineering. And I can remember Bill Shannon coming to the before the Board of Ed and saying, we're asking you to change this to this and this. And we said, no, you can change this. I think they wanted to change the physics labs. We said, no, that hits an educational spec. So you will retain control over that. But I'm concerned that, we have public site and building scheduled to come to us every month on both project and report. So they're scheduled the next time. So I'm a little concerned that I'm hearing things here for the first time, and the building committee is actually meeting in this building right now. And I really think that those concerns should be addressed to them, because, we're recording this meeting. I don't want the public to get the wrong idea, because I have no idea what these issues are. This is the first time I'm hearing about concerns about changing specs. They might make a recommendation, but that's going to be up to your board. You will retain control. I want to give you that.
And that is what is being addressed upstairs
Mr.
now.
Chairman?
And
Yeah.
trying to come down on the owner's representative job description and responsibility.
Well, yeah. I made a note of that.
Again, with our subject matter jurisdiction is just over the finances of it. I take your point, Matt. Let's be clear, if folks are watching this, there's some other things going on outside the jurisdiction of this Board of Finance. For our purposes, I believe we got the update that we needed. It was helpful. And again, look to have that kind of an update periodically. So, thank you. I think what we've heard is when folks approach us on the street, no changes. Lots of smart people looking at it from a construction standpoint. We've got lots of people looking at it from a finance standpoint. No real changes at this point. All right. Comptroller's report.
Okay. Prior to the meeting, I handed out the pre-closing summary of revenue and expenses. Just want to quickly go over the 2 pages. The first page is the revenue accounts, and you can see that we appropriated during the start of the fiscal year $72,966,495. we collected 74,291,746.93. So that's a surplus of 1,325,251. Just to go over a couple of the items in there, use of money, which is towards the bottom, third from the bottom. We had planned on 185, but interest rates have been moving up during the course of the year. So the bulk of that 460 is representative of the interest income we earned on the monies that are in either the sweep account or our investment accounts. Fines and forfeitures, that's basically when someone doesn't pay their taxes on time, there's an 18% charge for a delinquency fee, and pretty much the entire amount, I think it's 328, is 328,000 is the amount that we collected on that. Miscellaneous revenue, the bulk of that is the prior year's collection of taxes. So the two numbers really go in tandem. You got the collection of the taxes, plus you got also the collection of the fines that go with the prior taxes. You can see there too that the intergovernmental revenue, Ed, which is third from the top, is down 1,150,000. That's the amount that the state held back this year. But overall, this is pre-closing. The numbers may change a little bit, but we're in good shape. 1,325,000 is the surplus on the revenue. If you go to the expenses, there's a number of adjustments that have to take place. If you look at the bottom of the third column to the right, it shows a surplus of 2,834,000. That's not going to be the final result. First of all, the Board of Ed at 1,915,000 is probably going to be down to the 881 that they said, maybe a couple of dollars more, but it's the 881 is pretty firm. The education maintenance, the 460 account, there's adjustments in there that have to be made. There's expenses that were included for the renovations, pre-referendum renovations of the two schools that are going to come out, and that's going to be at a break-even point. It's pretty much going to be zero. Town insurance, that's something that we still have to allocate. It shows 102 negative balance. We have to allocate that to the enterprise fund, so pretty much that's going to go away. Planning and zoning, it shows a small amount, but the bulk of that caused that negative number is the Wright Pierce fees for the consulting services that they use. And it's just because there's it's a $6,079 negative number. There's more building taking place, and Wright Pierce is being used more often. Park and Rec shows the $196,000 deficit, but there's a little over $400,000 in program revenue on the revenue side. So, I mean, we can't charge off the revenue against the expenses. The auditors want it to be kept separate, so that's why you see a negative number there. And the same thing happens with the senior center. They have somewhere around $60,000 in revenue for their program fees, and it's showing a $17,000, $18,000 debt service, negative number, deficit. Then on the debt service, there's a remaining balance of $55,000, and you can see that it says adjusted, and that's because we appropriated from the fund balance a couple of meetings ago $2 million, which was already paid down on June 15th. So when we were making a payment, I just held back a little bit just to make sure that we were going to be okay. And it was actually $50,000, and there was one other that was slightly overstated by the difference of $54.67. The fleet maintenance, the $38,000 deficit. That's snow and ice in the wintertime, and that was $14,000, and maintenance on the highway trucks was $28,000. Although, let's see, not the transfer station, but the tree warden is down $43,000. $36,000 is representative of the last storm, the cleanup on the last storm and the cutting up the trees. They were paid in the last 2 months of the year. And I think that's pretty much it that I was looking into. So,
At least the bulk of that, would that be overtime?
Probably.
yeah.
112,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Bob, looking at some of the big numbers, employee benefits, why is that down, the 857? Why is it less 857?
Partnership plan, I would think, is part of it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we moved the two of the unions, and we're working on the third one, and possibly the fourth, but two of the unions were moved over to the partnership plan, so that's why it came down.
So that's a real pickup.
Yep, oh, yeah, there it is, page 5, yeah, 857.
Okay, and what about the Intergovernment agency, it's under 276, is that just capital non-recurring?
Yeah, that's part of the, is it that funding, or is it the funding for the paramedic service? It's either one of the two. Let me just see, page 6.
Bob, while you're, just thought process, do you have an estimate of what would be left, give or take,
At the end, after the revenue and expenses?
The net surplus?
net surplus?
Probably above $1 million, less than $2 million, somewhere in that range. It's certainly not gonna be in this area.
Yeah, I got it. You're
Yeah,
right.
that's a paramedic service, 275, that hasn't been transferred. And then if you see the miscellaneous charges, 334, that's 225 on the capital non-recurring. But overall, we're in real good shape, and maybe not so much the next meeting, but maybe in September, where we have November when we move towards the payment and possibly setting up the bond for the PD. We'll make a decision if we want to use some of this money to pay down the short-term debt, but that's a discussion for later on. All right. I got an email right before we were leaving today. I think you got it too. Kerm is going to be coming in next week, and we're getting a rebate of about $67,000 on the premium. So that's it's a premium, it's a dividend on the premium, We got something a little bit smaller last year. The year before, I don't think we received anything, and then the prior year to that, we was in the $30,000 range. So I guess they had a good year, so they share the surplus.
Good, so it looks like we're doing.
We're doing okay.
Yep.
Is
Okay.
the amount for utilities related to the solar farm?
Is the utility,
Is the amount for the utilities that we haven't spent related to the solar farm, is that taking in?
Probably
well,
a
that's
little bit.
way too soon right now. There are costs associated with that with Amoresco. But part of that, there's an allocation that goes out to the utilities, so that negative number will come down as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Hit that short-term debt hard.
Yes. Well, you don't want to do it too hard. You know what they said. They don't want to get nervous about us,
We gotta make sure they don't get nervous.
because we got a big bond coming up,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay, good. Any other questions for Bob?
Baldwin?
All right, good.
Liz, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, the last item on today's agenda is the discussion of budget process. This is something that the board has talked about for the last year or two, trying to get together at a time during a meeting where we could brainstorm kind of lessons learned from the last budget season in the sense of how we think we may be able to make the next budget season smoother for us. So in that kind of a framework, right, just brainstorming, what I thought we could do is we'll go down the table and just list ideas that folks have. With the idea of maybe coming back next meeting, I'll try to, if there's a common theme in the ideas, we'll organize them by common theme. And we'll figure out where we go from here. What I would like folks to think about is, again, the general approach is there are no silly ideas. However, I would ask us to think about that standard in light of what our subject matter jurisdiction is. Now, if we have some suggestions, I would prefer that they be something that are actions or bylaws, either directly or indirectly. I'd also ask that they be something that we think we can put in place during the next budget season. So not so grandiose, not so much boiling the ocean, but something that we really think we may be able to put into place to make the next budget season that much smoother. So that's kind of the background of why we're doing this, and maybe the running rules of how we're going to do it. I'd like this to be an open discussion. I know I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but Robert rules be damned. We'll have an open discussion where we'll talk about the ideas. Again, not in great detail today, but at least to give people a sense of what we're thinking. And we can figure out what the sequencing is. I know Wendy probably wants to go first.
Oh, yeah.
maybe just to even kind of start the process.
I've got two things right off the bat.
Okay, I would defer my going first to Cynthia because,
So, one thing is, I think it might be a good idea to change up the order of presentation so that Park and Rec isn't New York and Annie every year. Because, you know, like make it more of a random thing, because going in order, everybody knows they're gonna go in order. And then by the time it gets to the last numbers, then, you know, this way I think it would just be easier to, be fair.
Wait,
Like,
pull names out of a
well,
hat
I'm just
and
saying,
say you
when
one,
you
two,
get to
three.
Park and Rec, they're just like the last presentation, everyone's brain dead. It's just this way, you know, it would change it up, we wouldn't be feeling like we're plotting for it, it's just an idea.
we'd have to, yeah, and we'd have to then consider adding a fifth night to accommodate that schedule. You see it? You know, because we've been pulling it in to 4 nights, so we would have to go back to a fifth night.
Well, if we need it, I just thought maybe it would be more fair to mix it up.
So Cynthia, do
Might be open for energy. One question I have though, it seems like different departments, like, we know the Board of Education takes
Oh, well, they're
a
on
whole
their
night
own.
themselves.
Yeah,
But there are other groups that do take a little bit longer than others. Do we
True.
try to keep within a time schedule, or we just think of, okay, we're gonna meet for 2 hours this night, and, you know, these groups are 20-minute groupers, and these are 10-minute
I
groupers?
think
What's your
you
thought on
keep,
that?
my advice, keep to a time schedule, like you put 2 maxis in a mini, and there you go.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is, do we allocate ahead of time to say, maxi, mini?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
guys, can I just tell you that this is already done? That when we go through and we set the schedule and we invite the people to sign up, that Park and Rec is not always on the same schedule at the same time every budget. That we actually try to put minis and maxis together, and you know, we've been doing this long enough that we know that some departments don't take very long at all, others need more time, and all of that's taken into consideration. Now, what Wendy said, if we want to add a 5th night, then that would probably, you know, alleviate some of these late nights that we have and give us an opportunity to, you know, some of these department heads to get in fresh and early.
So to that point, maybe what I mean is that when we're voting and processing the stuff going through the book, we change it up for ourselves, so that we don't go from 100 to whatever, and we're plotting through it, we're approving, we're not approving.
So let the departments present when they present as laid out by Dion.
Yeah.
But our kind of consideration
Yeah.
will go in some other order.
Jump around just to
Sure.
keep it a little more lively and less.
Okay,
Silly.
one of two. What else you
Oh,
got
my
there?
other one, yeah.
Well,
So-
the very first one,
okay.
I'm gonna say read or consider the sequencing of department review by the Board of Finance.
Yeah, because it's not a presentation issue, I realize that. Here, you want to say
So kind of just optimize groupings. I'm sorry, you had something number 2?
that? Okay, so my next thing, and it was really brought to mind when we went through the process for approving the canopy for the train station. So sometimes when these things get presented, I feel a little sandbagged, because like it literally goes to the Board of Selectmen, then it comes right to us, but I didn't even know it was gonna happen. So I think that we have to have some sort of idea of this coming down the road. I mean, somebody must have known that it was falling into disrepair and that some money would be needed down the road. I just think we need a heads up, because that way we can do due diligence, or whatever we want to do is due diligence, rather than have to think on our feet and to get to the point where it's gonna fall on someone's head. You know, it would just for me, it would just give more flexibility in being able to plan that out in my head, or just know more in advance. Because there are several projects that I feel that this was, the police overage was one of those things. I mean, that could have been headed off, you know, in the sense of getting used to the idea rather than it being a crisis and being dropped in our laps. So that's the kind of thing I think that we need to know about before it gets approved by the Board of Selectmen and then to us, and then boom, we gotta make a decision.
So you're saying you want more like of a heads up on the pipeline of what you think is like 3 years away, 5 years away kind of stuff?
Not even like that, like even if they're, like a month before they came in with the presentation, would be like, guess what, you know, that thing's crumbling and, you know, it's not gonna be very long before we need to, and then we have other things we might be making decisions on, and it's all, you know, going into the process.
And thinking about this from the perspective of how can we create our own process, is that the Board of Finance gets into the habit of, if something comes to us on very short notice, we consider it that day and we hold off final decision until the next meeting.
And that's great, and if I had been thinking that way, because of course I thought afterwards, I said, you know, we could have just tabled that for a week or two. So that, yeah, I mean, I think that maybe that is.
And obviously, there are going to be times when it's an emergency, but I think to your point, it's.
Absolutely, but this was not an emergency.
Just
This
rescind the
is
process.
something that.
Yeah, they just agreed. So that's
had to be.
So my suggestion kind of, I don't know, might go along with what you're saying. In the budget meetings, I felt that, especially when we were doing our town hall meetings and people were coming up with certain requests for clarification, I'm thinking specifically this street sweeper. We all kind of looked over to Matt as our expert on just about everything that came up that we didn't really know about. Some of the things, when we were in this meeting sitting here, we were told about fire trucks and other trucks, but I don't think that we retain them as well as necessary when we went before a meeting and there were no objections or additional clarifications raised. And I know, you know, a lot of times we say, hey, Matt, what do you remember about this? And he would bail us all out, or it could be Bob. What my suggestion is, and this is what might overlap with Cynthia's, is that as Board of Finance, we more or less look to some departments, major expense departments, and become more familiar earlier on than the budget process with what's going on. So for instance, there are a lot of financial needs in the capital plan for fire trucks, fire equipment, etc. You know, someone might be a little bit more, you know, working with that group, more of a liaison type person. And that liaison type person kind of somewhat answered your needs, Cynthia, of saying, oh, you know,
Yeah.
the roof is, the sky's falling down on the canopy or whatever. Have a little bit more, you know, it's an unofficial liaison type thing where we're aligned. And then when we're sitting in a public hearing, it's not always Matt who has to respond, but I might know that the sweeper is needed for environmental reasons.
Yeah.
And not just because we want sand off of our streets.
Well, that lends itself to my third idea. which
Could I
think
just
is
make a suggestion though to
Sure.
that one?
Open-minded.
No. I was actually, I was gonna offer to do something for you that might help, so that's my open-mindedness. I was gonna offer that it might help, because everything that has to go before the Board of Selectmen before it goes before you. So would it help you if, when I finish minutes for the Board of Selectmen, if I also send it to the Board of Finance? And then that way you see the minutes from the previous meeting, you get a chance to read them, and then you can, if there's something that you question, then you can investigate it and figure it out.
Would it be a hardship for departments that, I mean, I'm skating on the edge of operations, but I didn't mean to, that department heads could just give a brief update, like Robert did with the construction, but how their departments are doing, it's like, oh, I think we're gonna need this, and that way you just keep abreast of it. Like every 3 months, just about by.
Specific financial, exactly.
Yeah,
We don't wanna get
just
into,
very,
you know. yeah,
I think we
we're not
ask a
done.
lot of our employees already, and then to come out for no
Can I just,
real
just a couple of
purpose
things? You
when
know,
we
the-
have
The
it.
canopy was a strange animal,
It's not.
because we owned the building,
no.
but
I
we
know.
didn't own the canopy. And it's only in a process now, so we couldn't touch anything with the canopy, and that canopy should have been taken down years ago, really, when it came down to
Okay,
it.
I'll think of another example.
I know, but the other thing with the fire trucks, you gotta figure they're gonna come in with two ladder trucks again this year. So that's gonna be $3 million. Both of them are gonna ask for one apiece.
We have the most fire trucks
I know.
next to Ridgefield. Ridgefield is the only town that has more fire trucks than we do.
Cynthia, does that capture what you're saying? Kind of have a process that allows sufficient time for due diligence consideration to make an informed.
Yeah, whatever
decision.
that means. I mean, whatever that, no, I know what that means, but however that
Yeah, we'll have to
means
figure out.
manifested, which I'm not really sure how.
Hey, Robert, yours is,
Isn't the back end of that though, the fire, let's take that example, right? The firemen coming to us and doing their due diligence and saying, here's the needs analysis.
Mhm.
Here's the reason we need these fire trucks. Here's the population, here's the number of fires. Whatever they use, they've got to have something to use, right? Like, I didn't see a lot of that necessarily this year.
I think we need to have somebody that's independent to let us know what they actually need.
Well, I would even trust our firemen, but I didn't necessarily see a needs analysis.
This is something that I've been gunning
Yeah.
for
Ed
many
Brewy-
that big.
Ed Brewy talked about that for an hour.
What?
You might, I wonder if you were not there that night.
Right.
I was at all the meetings, but I didn't necessarily see any data. I saw a lot of, well, we can't get under this tunnel with this
Right.
fire truck and, you know, so on. So there, but I didn't necessarily see like the data on why do we need this.
Amen, sister.
I
I
saw-
agree
think
with her.
that they
And
had-
what?
I think that they had a
Said she
folder
agreed.
of information, right? Was that the one that had a folder of information?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, from my perspective, I didn't necessarily see data. I saw anecdotal reasons why we
Mhm.
needed it.
Absolutely agree with you 1,000%. Because that's the whole thing, it's like, you can show the nice pictures, I'm not saying they don't know that they made something or they, makes it anecdotal, but you're absolutely right. You make the PowerPoint presentation, you show pictures of fire trucks, and then you say we can't fit under the bridge, but I know exactly what you mean, like some sort of something that
Look at the Board
shows.
of Ed presentation as a model,
Yeah.
right? Like they look at, I know it's a different science, right? It's a different topic, but they look at number of students served in different categories and how are we serving them? And what would it cost us to do it another way? And it's just a very, I thought personally, a well thought out analysis of who are we serving, how are we serving them, how can we better serve them and more efficiently and use our tax dollars more efficiently? And I just personally didn't see that. I should go back and look at it. I'm sorry to speak without looking at it currently because I haven't seen it in a few months.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's-
if I can address that, I think we're kind of getting off your plan a little bit, but I will certainly pass along to the department heads that more data is requested. I think that's a reasonable request. But on the specific example, I'm not sure what else the fire department could have provided, because, what I remember was 3 stories, X number of feet, with 30 feet of setback equals 110-foot ladder is what, so I thought, I was surprised to hear that you felt that wasn't sufficient data.
But if you look at, for example, like the police officers that were requested, right? They actually had data that looked at number of calls and coverage and the amount of time it takes to do that job. And it was like a well thought out analysis of why we needed it. Well, they wanted 2, we gave them 1, right?
Mhm.
So, and I'll go back and look at the fire station stuff. Maybe I didn't do a good review of that, but.
But even if not fire department,
Not
there's
fire,
other things,
whatever.
there are other departments too that could use more data.
Whenever somebody's asking for another resource or another piece of equipment or whatever, I just like to see the data related to it. I'd like to see some data.
And I suspect that data is available, and much of
Yeah.
that probably gets presented
Maybe in the board of selectmen.
before it comes to us.
Oh, I was gonna make a suggestion also that these folks get the Board of Selectmen agendas so you can see what's coming up.
Yeah.
So, we can do that. Yeah, send
And
it
that
all.
way, if you want to come to a meeting or if you want to, know,
I-
in the minutes.
I do want to point out, just because it came up, I agree with Cynthia's proposal, suggestion that we try to give some advance notice on these things. The Canopy has been owned by the state, and the state came to us in 2010 and said, well, the canopy's fallen down, we're going to tear it down. And we've been negotiating with the state of Connecticut, ConnDOT, for 7 years on that, and they finally said, okay, tell you what, we'll let you take it over, you got to do it right now. So I would hesitate to have you create a hard and fast rule that says, anything that comes up like this, we're going to give it 30 days. Sometimes things are going to come up that are urgent, no matter what we do. So I would just ask you to keep that in mind.
Bob already explained that.
Okay.
I think with the-
And
I
we-
mean, I just mentioned that, I should take that away.
No, but I think we as a-
No, the point's taken, I get
Yeah,
it.
I understand.
And we as a board may want to think about getting more comfortable with saying, thank you very much for your presentation. We need some time to think about it, come back next meeting.
Yes.
And, that I think is a very natural response to a big issue being brought to us that's complicated when we're trying to make a decision that's in the best interest of the town.
And I didn't mean to single out the fire department necessarily, I just think in general.
Example, okay.
asking, we need to see data, like what's the needs analysis behind it, right?
One of the,
Things like, I was just saying, like, for example, to Delene's point, I wanted more data from Parks and Rec. I mean, I'm just saying, another department, not the fire department, there are some departments that it's almost like very emotional that they need something, and I would really like to see data for that. Like, I mean,
Well, and they actually had asked to do a needs analysis study, right? Unfortunately,
That's correct.
$30,000 study, but they have asked to actually look at our recreational facilities.
Well,
and
that's
see
not
what's-
what I meant. I meant like they need a new vehicle, and they're, that's really what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about needs analysis. But I know what you're talking
But
about.
I think that is their attempt to say, like, here's where we are, here's where we'd like to be, how
Well,
do we
yeah.
get there?
I guess what I'm saying is if they want a vehicle, they could say how many times they did X, Y, and Z, and, what it was used for, and what, and that's all I'm saying.
And part of this, I think, is there's a way that, in a more analytical sense, we understand things. And they're not necessarily coming from that same background, that they can sell us that in the way we really need to understand it. And, we sometimes think a little differently, and I think that's what Dee's saying, is that she's looking for a presentation that really hits her, and that she doesn't have to work to figure it out. And I don't know what that is, and that's why I went back to my suggestion where if we all reached out a little bit more to, during the process, maybe we could help them package it so that our colleagues would get it a little bit easier. Say Cynthia's in charge of the animal shelter, and is very conversant about what's needed and why it's needed and what are the requirements of the state, et cetera, and where what the damage is. And then if we have any questions, not when they're presenting, but maybe afterwards, why are we talking about this again?
I just want to make sure I'm counting.
What's going on, Cynthia?
So is it just a general approach to considering these requests that is more data-driven? And making clear,
A little bit more data.
I was going to make a suggestion, that something that the Board of Ed has done very well for years is they do a preliminary presentation to the board, and before they vote on it, and this would get a little complicated with what we're required to do by charter, but all the board members send in questions. Then they collate them into Terry Yansky's office, and then all those questions are answered, and I think maybe we can institute something like that.
During the budget workshop.
We would probably have to advance the whole process by a couple of weeks and start that earlier in order to accommodate that, because our charter requires the department heads to present to a joint meeting. And that, of course, they're not burdened with that requirement, so they do that part all the way up in early January, where there's a preliminary budget. But we can try to move it ahead earlier and get you, and do those presentations, so you have more time to digest before we get down to crunch time.
I think another advantage of that is, at some point in the future, the town should say, well, the Board of Finance have really looked at this hard, they really know what the hell they're doing, and, you know, let's go with their recommendations because we have a lot of faith in them. I don't think that's where we are today, but I think that if we, you know, work towards that ultimate goal by being a little bit more aware of all the different issues, then we can build that confidence. And then, of course, part of that is how do we communicate that, which I'm not comfortable with our communication platforms right now.
So that's just replicate what the Board of Ed does, right? They use Google Docs and they have everybody
Yes.
post to Google Docs.
Mhm.
And then Terry, in their case, does the, I think, answering of those questions or getting information. We'd have to find some point person on the town side.
One of the things I dream about is getting both of our boards, this one and Board of Selectmen, on a Google Doc iPad system, so our agendas and all our data and all our document sharing is done the same way the Board of Ed does it. We still have some IT challenges to get to that point, but that would facilitate that kind of thing. Because they've been doing that for years.
If I may, just one point of, when we start this process budgeting at the Board of Ed, there's a clear understanding that if you're gonna come with a new idea or a dramatically different approach to something, there has to be supportive data, there has to be cost analysis, and you have to have considered other options to what you're recommending. So it's just not, I need this and, you know, I need you to support it. That has to be fully supported, understood, because you're gonna be grilled by the board members on all elements of that.
You know, that's interesting, because what I have always marveled at is the Board of Ed, you know, really has their shit together in the sense of that, the communication, the way their website's set up. I mean, I'm not like throwing shade on anybody, but it just seems like they've got this working machine. We need to avail ourselves of that, whether it's a knowledge of having some sort of combo kind of meeting where we can share these things so that we can implement some of the Board of Ed's successful ways of approaching things.
And to kind of follow up on that, or to identify those considerations, I'll take these, I'll summarize them, and I'll add some of the things we're gonna have to follow up on, like seeing if there's an IT resource who's comparable to the IT resource that is available for the Board of Ed.
Yeah.
I think something that what I would find helpful is when we get that big piece of paper that's all the, like the long-term capital plan. Okay? Not just your, not your non-recurring stuff,
Yeah.
your big, longer stuff. It always seems to me that it's always so much more than we could ever pay for, okay? And that you could ever, you know, need or want or use. And I think there's gotta be a way to make that more realistic and more manageable in terms of, you know, I mean, and stuff flows from, you know, we can't do it this year, so then we'll do it this year, and then we're gonna do it this year, and then at some point in time, it's gonna have to drop off, because you're just never gonna get to it. You know, I think just a more manageable, realistic way to look at the, not the capital, non-recurring, the real capital stuff.
Well,
Like future goals.
what
versus-
happens is it doesn't drop off, it turns into a crisis that gets dealt with.
That's
And
true, right.
I mean, and that's one of the points I was trying to make in the budget process, is that our capital planning, when we started this 8 years ago, didn't start out that way. It started, but we get to the point where we're pushing more things off.
Right.
And like I said, it's like pushing sand down a table, it piles up, and that's something that I know that this board is trying to deal with, and balancing short-term borrowing and operating.
Right, I mean, it all flows together, right, you know,
Right.
but.
Just to understand about the Google Docs, you talking about the budget, Matt?
No, actually, Bob put Google Docs up.
What the Board of, well, I'll
Their
describe it as
agenda.
I understand it.
Oh, just the agenda?
What the Board of Ed does is they have their presentation, and then all the Board of Ed members can submit questions
Oh,
to any
okay.
particular line item.
Right.
And then
They
it's
submit
responded.
those
And
questions
they have them all
via,
grouped up as to what member asked them, and then if they're duplicates, Terry reads those out, and,
Mhm.
yeah.
and so it's all kind of centralized. Anybody can look to see what the question was, to see what the answer is.
Okay.
Kind of keeps it.
No, I was thinking about, you know, an Excel worksheet that's on
Yeah.
Google Docs, but we need control over that document, because if somebody starts to change it, one of the board members, then We have no idea where it's going.
One person or two people have the rights to edit, and just other people have the right to look at
You
it.
can control.
Yeah, you can control it very easily.
I think the Board of Finance members would be asking the questions, and then here, somebody would have the responsibility, the access to provide the answers. Is the concept of the Board of Ed.
Can I just say something to Claudia's point? I'm just thinking with the capital plan, even if you extend it out all that time, there's gotta be some kind of knowledge as to when that is gonna reach a tipping point. Like
Yeah.
in the sense of, so rather than, like, there has to be like a do it or die list and not have anything cluttering it, you know, not have something that's just not essential in that. And then know that in 5 years, this is definitely, you know, has to be done. And everything doesn't have to get to be an emergency thing, but at least we have a digestible amount in 1 year to consider. You know
Well,
what I'm
like
saying?
this past year, we had $11 million.
And we cut it down. I mean,
Right.
we gave you a
Right.
digestible
Yeah.
The
amount.
bulk of that's being pushed out to
It's,
next year and the year after, you know?
But-
But there's items that have been even pushed out further. I
Right.
mean, the water park that you wanted to put in 6 or 7 years ago has been
10
pushed out 3 or 4 years ago.
But
yeah.
within that list, there's gotta be, it's like a triage, there's gotta be some sort of triage for some of those items now.
Well, I wanna make sure I understand what you're asking, because we do that now.
Okay.
We try to put everything on there. I mean, the staff spends, especially the staff that is capital intensive, so Park and Rec, Highway, Public Works, they spend a lot of time doing, fire departments, you know, we actually hired a consultant to analyze all of our fire apparatus and give us the 30-year schedule as to when they come out. So we put that on the capital list, and it's big. It's big, but that's the truth. Those are the numbers that we have to deal with sometime over the next 10 years, and we move that out on a rolling horizon. So with this year, to Bob's point, we triaged it. We said, there's no way we're going to go to the voters and say we need $10 million worth of stuff. So we whacked it down to 2 point something, and then you guys moved some of it over to capital non-recurring. I don't know how we can do that any better, because what I hear you saying is you want a more manageable list. That means we take things off and you don't see them. And I don't think
And
that's
then-
what you want.
Right, and then some boards of finance then
Right, I mean,
criticized after. that.
perfect
You need the
example,
plow trucks.
perfect example of one that just got pushed off year after year after year. So you guys will remember, Cynthia, you remember Eileen Earle's vehicle from last summer.
Yeah.
13 years old. It was used, she got used from another department. The brakes, the transmission, and the floor rotted out. And in the middle of July, in the middle of the busiest season, we had to replace a vehicle because we had it on the schedule. I said, well, we can get 1 more year out of it, 1 more year, and then finally it just blew up. So we're trying to avoid that. I agree with you. The numbers have to be realistic. Maybe there has to be a little bit more of a realistic budget, operating budget between borrowing and capital non-recurring, that we can pay for more of this stuff before it turns into a crisis. But that's something that we have to work toward together, I think.
I think with the capital non-recurring at 500,000 and moving it up over a period of time, you're gonna have the availability in there to buy a plow truck, maybe even a fire engine. you know.
At some point,
You know,
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great goal that, we have.
Mhm.
We just need to support it over the long run.
exactly.
Just being sensitive of time and knowing that we're gonna kind of continue this to the next meeting, are there other points people want to just get on this chart real quick, or do we want to stop? I have one item that I want to put on there, and this is only kind of something that was kind of in my thought about being open-minded to different meetings and things. I was curious as to whether or not a Board of Finance quarterly update to the Board of Selectmen would be helpful. That would help, I believe it would help the two boards stay pretty in line with various kind of economic and financial considerations. For example, one of the things that I got a lot during the budget process was from knowledgeable finance people. They came back and they would say something like, well, it seems like the Board of Selectmen's on a different page than the Board of Finance when it comes to various matters. And that might have been just an interpretation that was not correct, or it may have been that we were on different pages. But to the extent that we get together and maybe the Board of Finance makes a quarterly presentation to the Board of Selectmen, I think that'll keep us more in line. So it was one of the things I wanted to think about was whether that made sense, what the content of that approach would be. or that meeting would be. And, you know, just again,
Would it
see.
be us making it to them or them making it to us, because we don't get it until they approve it?
No, you know, for example, we would take Bob's comptroller report and say, look, here's the comptroller's report. Do you discuss the comptroller's report with the Board of Selectmen?
No.
And
Matt
so-
has it, but.
I get it.
And the thought being something along the lines, look, here's the presentation, this is where we are. We're not managing a checkbook anymore, we're kind of managing something with a 3-4 year plan. This is how it all pieces together. We've got a fund balance, but let's not think of that fund balance as, you know, a kitty that you can go into at any time. You've got rating agency considerations. You want to try to use that fund balance so to pay down short-term debt. All of those kind of just related items that we think about all the time. I think it would be helpful for the Board of Selectmen to hear that from us, to kind of understand what is and isn't maybe doable from a financial standpoint.
So like a quarterly joint meeting,
Or
is that?
just the Board of Finance being on the Board of Selectmen's agenda for a 5-minute discussion.
Mhm.
You know, here's where we're tracking, this is what we think it'll do to the fund balance, here's our short-term debt outstanding, here's what a AAA rating is gonna require, here's what's available for us. Board of Selectmen, when you go talk to departments, here, you'll now understand kind of our thought process around what we think the next budget's going to look like, or need to look like, and that message can start coming out earlier as opposed to later.
All right, put it up there.
Put it right up there, Bob.
Just kind of leave you with one thought, observation I have had in my 10 years. The biggest, most dramatic change on the Board of Education has been our strategic plan. That becomes the marching orders for everybody. Everything that's recommended, everything that's done is couched against that strategic plan. And if you are not on the road that we all are on, you better have a good reason why, and why that course correction has to be made. But there is a mindset amongst everybody, down to the teachers, down to people in the cafeteria. They believe strongly in that. That's the biggest change that I have seen, the most dramatic change I've seen. There were years ago where we wouldn't ask somebody to go from first grade to second grade because they would fight us. Now it's understood if we have a bubble class, that's where you're going, so get ready.
We actually, there were noises made about that Board of Finance, but it just never got there, you know, to work out like a 5-year plan or.
Where do you want the town to be?
But I think the key for the Board of Ed strategic plan and any good strategic plan is that they've got like 4 or 5 priorities. Like, that's it. It's 4 or 5, right? Is it 4 or 5? And they're sticking to that. Like, everything that he maps to those priorities. So if we as a Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance could jointly come up with those strategic imperatives, that would be a great idea. But it's gotta be a manageable, small number that says, here's our 4 or 5 key priorities. And then that's where we put our resources against, right, to make those things happen. It's a fantastic idea. I don't know how you get it done with the charter and everything else, but that is a fantastic idea.
Well, the charter doesn't really come in.
No, well, you know, it's, thinking about those words, we're kind of doing that, but we don't have it down on paper. And Cynthia has been on the board for a number of years now. Several of you are new, but we've been working toward moving up the highway budget to the point where it's sustainable. And now we're moving toward moving up the capital non-recurring so it's sustainable. That's my new buzzword, is we need to have sustainable budgets so we're not managing by crisis or borrowing money to get out of the hole. So we've kind of been working in that direction for several years now. I think the difference is we just haven't put it down on paper.
And that's important to
Yeah.
have it like a skeleton.
Right.
I think those are more operational things, like the things that they have as strategic imperatives are like every student can learn.
Yeah, right.
So that's a strategic thing. So what are the tactical things, like making sure we have a budget for special ed and for gifted learners and whatever, that go towards every student can learn, right?
Mhm.
And so if we could come up with those 4 or 5 strategic priorities, right? Like, for example, I don't know, public safety, we can drive on our roads, right? Like, that has to do with a lot of different departments and making sure those are funded appropriately. or.
Well, that's-
Well,
or
highway
back
department,
to
it was just to put cash in there, so we weren't bonding it out, which is important, so.
Right.
But that is not just operational, and that's part of the plan.
And maybe what we can do next meeting is talk a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
about what is a strategic plan.
But I think ours has to be the financial strategic plan. Like, we need to have a AAA rating, no matter what it
Right.
takes, we have to have a
Right.
AAA rating, okay? Another one is, we wanna get to the point where we have no, we have paid off all of our short-term debt. Did you know, that would be something else that would be, strategically important for the town about, no short-term debt. And that's, I think, if that's the road we wanna take, which I think is a fabulous idea, that's our imperative, is,
Right.
and, this is
I
what
totally
we want to
agree.
say something about the
Yeah.
fund balance. Here's our
Right.
goal on the fund balance is X, Y, Z, whatever it is, I
Mhm.
think
And I
that's.
think, Claudia, too, that we should be mapping to the board of selectmen.
Oh, absolutely, they have to be in sync.
Sure.
Which are more
You
a
know.
vision for Bethel,
Mhm.
right? More like, who do we want to be as a town, right? What's our vision for Bethel, right? And then the board of finance maps to that.
Well, that planning process is underway right now because we're town meeting government and we're highly decentralized. That is captured in the plan of conservation and development, which is now underway right now with planning and zoning. But what you're saying presents a really good opportunity to take the POCD through the Board of Selectmen and say, what kind of resources do we need to get
Get
to
there.
where P and Z has set up as a vision, and of course, we all participate in that too. So you can link those together, so Plan of Conservation Development, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance can go and get in sync on
From a
that.
purely pragmatic standpoint, the AAA rating, that kind of thing you can really,
Stands alone.
yes, and like
Yeah.
non-negotiable, that is what we, have to adhere to, or just, smaller things. That's kind of big picture stuff, and I'm thinking that pragmatically, we can have 3 things that we say that's a non-negotiable, that's just what we have to do.
Right, or and this is maybe for the next discussion, right, we tell the town, look, these are what we advise as being non-negotiable. You all may think differently, but we would then say, here's the consequence of doing something different. And then it's a value decision by the town. For example, does the town want to be more risky? Does it want to incur more debt? Right? We as financial advisors would say, no, you don't want to go that route. You want to go, good times, you want to pay down the debt. But to some degree, we will have touchstones, and then we're going to have to figure out how to communicate them to
Well,
the
that
town.
goes to Robert's point about being able to, back it up and explain things to.
Yeah, I don't know if you did with the town council.
So it kind of sounds like we talked about, the board of ed already has a strategic plan. The board of selectmen sort of has one, maybe it's not on paper, maybe we still have some work to do. And the board of finance needs one, and we all need to align, right? And we need to cascade, probably from the board of selectmen's plan, which is the vision for Bethel, right? And out of that, you guys already have your strategic plan, but I'm pretty sure it probably aligns with whatever you guys are doing. And board of finance has some things that are low hanging fruit that we have to do, like AAA bond rating, and maybe there's some other things that we can do strategically to support the vision for Bethel.
But the things like AAA bond rating and those pieces are part of what your vision is of Bethel. Whether it's 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, what kind of town do you want this to be? And what you need to do to get there. That's our vision of education. What we expect to be able to do for the kids that leave us, so we don't leave anybody behind. All kids can learn as part of that.
This is just me, I don't see the Board of Finance as being, I see it as a slightly different animal than the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education as far as scoping out the vision. Because we're very, nuts and bolts, so we can certainly share a vision, but you can't make financial decisions wholly on a vision. Right?
Yeah,
You
we'll
know
have
what
to-
I'm getting at?
Yeah, it's a little.
Board of Finance is the enabler for
Yes.
wherever the Board of Selectmen believe this town should be and where we believe education should be. You're the enabler.
Well, that means that we would all have to be on the, or the majority on the same page, obviously,
And
because otherwise it's not.
And we should talk more about it, but I
We
think
can have our own
we,
vision.
the Board of Finance, I think, are uniquely positioned to be the integrator of all
Yeah.
of these. Right, because we really do have to figure out if the town wants to pay for it, and then how the town pays for it. And, we can explain why AAA is important, why a certain fund balance is important. But I do think we're uniquely positioned to integrate all of those strategic plans.
So I suggest that of course, as you suggested, put this down on a chart, whatever, and then come prepared to assign some kind of ownership, whether it's one person or multiple people. Also, very take these ideas and have a very succinct object statement of what we really want to accomplish, and then what are the next steps in order to get there.
I think we've got to be careful about, interacting outside of the meeting, so we just have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, which is why I'd like to have an August meeting. Folks, kind of let us know what your travel calendars are.
Oh, yeah, I do. Wait.
Sure, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll add it to the list. Understanding that we'll just have to further discuss it after the meeting next week. All right. Anything more on this?
No, the one thing I would just like to very briefly talk about, when it comes to our fund balance, I don't want to say windfall, because I don't mean that at all.
Well, but right, it's not a windfall, because we have
Right.
short-term debt.
Right.
No, Wendy, I mean, just to avoid that perception that we overtax people.
Right.
I mean, the reason why there's a 1.3.
Oh, I understand it.
We budget 98.7.
Absolutely.
And right now, this year, she broke 99.2,
Which I
is
think is
highly
incredible.
unusual.
Absolutely.
You know, so,
But-
and that's the reason why you have that type of money, too.
Right. So what I'm saying with that is that we had talked about setting up the little accounts or earmarking, appropriating money for a fire truck or this or for that. I would like to see, before we do anything, that the Board of Selectmen, weigh in on this. If you have specific goals, like if, that maybe we could do something, move in that, towards that direction.
Yep, that'll be fun. Might involve pizza.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yay.
We meet the same second Tuesday of August, what's that date?